Good day. Thank you so much for tuning in to the St. Mark Moment. You know, first, let me welcome you on behalf of our pastor, Bishop Alton A. Smith, the St. Mark Health Ministry, and the entire St. Mark Church. I'm Dr. Alma Jenkins, and I want to welcome you to the St. Mark Moment. Now, I've checked, and there were not really any questions about coronavirus this time. Hopefully, there'll be some next time. But there is a question that may come up because you're going to hear on the news. They're talking now about the fact that if someone with coronavirus sneezes in a room, that some of the droplets can hang in the air for a period of time. And we call that getting aerosolized. You know, like an aerosol that you spray in the room? Well, some of the very, very tiny droplets can just suspend in the air and just kind of hang there for a period of time, until they go away. You've seen some of that kind of whenever sunlight comes through a window and you see all these little like dust particles in the air just suspended. Well, some of the coronavirus particles that are in your secretions can do that as well. What do you do about that? Well, first of all, I tell people, or I'm telling you, let me say, that when you hear that, I wouldn't get real worried about it because if you're doing what you should be doing, which is wear a mask, which is keep social distancing, all that is good. But when you think about it, you can walk into a room, maybe that person just left the room and they've sneezed and those droplets are hanging. What are the chances that you're going to breathe those droplets in and get coronavirus? If you're wearing a mask, probably very little. Now, that doesn't mean the mask is 100%, but it means you're better off to have one on than you are if you don't have one on, if you're going into a place where there are people. So you say, yeah, but this guy just walked out of the room and the room is empty. Things like that can happen, unanticipated things, sort of what I call outliers, things that are not usual. And, many things are possible, but it's unlikely. I mean, the viral load that you would get would probably be less, I would think. So there's always that too, viral load. How much of the virus are you actually bringing into yourself? Because remember, the aerosol is gradually, slowly disappearing as well. It's not going to stay there. It's going to gradually go away. So, that is possible. It is possible that you could not have a mask on, walk into an elevator, the guy just sneezed, there's a lot of it there, and you just breathe it in. That's possible. But those kinds of situations are not as likely because if you're getting on an elevator, if you are out in the public and you're getting on an elevator, you don't know who's in that elevator. You should have a mask on. So you see, all of that is more fuel for the argument that you should wear a mask. So let me encourage all of you to just put it on. It's not going to hurt you to put it on. It's only going to help. And it's going to help the other person actually very much as well. So that's one thing I wanted to put out there. You're going to hear about that. And I wanted to just kind of address that. Now, if you have a question more about that, send it in. Email it to us on our website. Just email it. If you don't know what that is, the email address is, you forget it. Just Google St. Mark Church and our website will come on and it will have the website, it will have our email address. And you may email us whatever question you have. And then if it's not a question directly about the pandemic, maybe you want to ask us about, a health question. And speaking of that, I'm going to say a word about one of the things on the list of 10 things. There are top 10 killers of people in the United States. Of course, coronavirus is a very big one now. That would be on our top 10 list for sure. But even prior to the pandemic, we had a list of the top 10 things that kill people. I'm going to tell you what the number 10 thing is and the number 1 thing. You might be surprised at the number 10 thing. The number 10 thing is suicide. Yes, the number 10 thing is suicide. And that was kind of, that can be surprising to you. I've done this search before, so I knew that suicide was in the group. But you know, more people that did not commit suicide in the past are now doing so. For instance, you in times past, you would rarely hear of an African American committing suicide. When I was growing up, you rarely heard about that because we tended to believe that, you know, that was one of those unforgivable things. You know, that's what people believed. And you hardly heard about a black person who committed suicide, but that's not a rare thing to hear now. And in this pandemic, my guess is that, you know, some of the aftermath of this might well include that. So be aware of the fact that this is causing a tremendous emotional challenge to many people, some more than others, especially those who are right at the edge already. And of course, the number 1 thing that kills people in this country and really all over the world, the number 1 thing is heart disease. Heart disease. Now, one of the reasons I want to say a word about heart disease is because a lot of what is going on with your heart can depend on what else is going on with you, what you're eating, how much exercise are you getting, you know, what is your mental state. So, you know, all of that feeds into possible heart disease. And one of the other things I found out about the top 10 things that kill people is that many of those things are changeable, preventable. Lifestyle change can actually help the majority of those things on the top 10 list. Now, there are things we can't change. We know our sex, our race, you know, what socioeconomic status we're born into. Those are things we can't go back and change. But there are things we can change. And those things seem to largely affect most of the 10 diseases that kill people in this country. Now, what does that mean? That means that we can change those things. We don't have to be one of those statistics. The things that help to change those things are lifestyle changes, what we eat, how much exercise we get, and how we handle stress. Let me say that again. What we eat, how much exercise we get, and I'm going to include sleep in that category, and how much sleep we get, and how we handle stress. If we can conquer those 3 areas pretty well, we've got a lot of that top 10 list taken care of, meaning that we can avoid being on that top 10 list for the most part. Okay? So granted, there are some reasons for the diseases on that list that you don't have anything to do with. For instance, with heart disease, there are some congenital heart problems that you can have. You were born with that, you know, but clearly most of the problems are not that for that reason. So let's talk a little bit about exercise, because many of us are not getting it now. And remember, that can feed into the number 1 killer of everyone in this country, and that would be heart disease. So how can we use exercise to try to tip that scale back away from the cliff? You need to exercise at least 4 days a week for 20 to 30 minutes. Let me say that again. You need to exercise at least 4 days a week for at least 20 to 30 minutes. Now, you might say, oh, I can't do it for 20 minutes. That's okay. Do it in 10-minute increments or 5-minute increments, you know, and do it at different times. You know, if you watch television a lot, then you know that many of the shows are mostly commercials, mostly commercials. So if you will exercise every time a commercial comes on, do your hand exercises or walk in place or something. At the end of 3 hours of TV, you can get in about 5 minutes of exercise just doing that. Okay, that's one way to sneak it in, kind of a fun way. You know, when the commercial goes off, you stop exercising. Try it. Just try it. The other thing is to put yourself on a schedule and say, okay, you have to be to work at 9. So maybe you have to leave the house at 8:30. Get up a little early, do 10 minutes before you go to work. Do 10 minutes at lunch, and then do another 10 minutes when you come home from work. Now, many of you are working from home, so put that schedule down even though you're working from home. I want to encourage everyone to exercise, because if you don't exercise, your body deconditions. You know what that means? That means that it starts to wear down. It's excuse me, it's that old adage to use it or lose it. So if you don't use it, then it's going to not work as well. If you keep walking and walking, every day you walk some, you're going to be able to walk further without getting short of breath, without getting really tired. So, you know, that's one of the benefits of consistent exercise. Now, I don't mean a regimen where you do, you do 40 minutes on Monday, but then you don't exercise again until next Monday. So you're going to undo everything you did, okay? So try to do 4 days out of the 7, and that's going to do you some good. So you're gonna give your heart a little workout, your legs, and then do a little weightlifting if you can, because that helps strengthen your bones. As we get older, our bones get thinner, okay? Which is why many times they'll advise you to go and get a bone density study after a certain age, because the bone starts to thin. But if you continue to challenge your bones with weight, that will help them to stay strong. And that's really important. You don't see that until you're older, when you start to think about falling, which becomes a real hazard as we get older, falling. So heart disease is greatly helped by exercising, because you also take in more oxygen. And what does that do? That gives more oxygen to your vessels. When you take a deep breath in, you're taking in a big supply of oxygen, just like feeding your organs, because the oxygen is in the blood. And you know what's interesting? There's a verse in the Bible that says the life is in the blood. And that's true, because the blood carries the oxygen. And that is what keeps you going. You have to be able to get oxygen, and so does your organs. They have to get enough oxygen. So when you exercise, you're taking in more oxygen, you're feeding your organs, and that's just something that will change the game for you if you do it consistently. So let me encourage those of you who are not exercising to do so, okay? From here forward, don't beat yourself up because you haven't been doing it, but just make it a point that from here forward, I'm going to do that, all right? Now, be sure to send your questions in. Thank you so much for watching the St. Mark Moment. We love you. Have a wonderful week. To God be the glory. I lost